Let me guess, you signed up for every free lead magnet and binged on every marketing YouTube video and thought, what am I missing? Why isn't my business exploding like that? Well, I can tell you, you're not alone. Whether you're just getting started or have an established business, entrepreneurship can be really lonely. But it doesn't have to be. Overcoming your fear of launching or building your personal brand or figuring out how to scale, it shouldn't be holding you back. It should be empowering you. On this podcast, we're going to deep dive into the mechanics of what it takes to build your brand, make your mark, and stake your claim in the digital marketing space. I'll be chatting with people from all walks of life and stages in their careers. I will be getting inspiration from real experts who will share their actual strategies and techniques to grow loyal and raving followings and sell more stuff. This is entrepreneurship from people who are already there making it happen. My name is Jeff Mendelson. Join me and welcome to the One Big Tip podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. And today I am excited to have Fred Ashman on the line with me. Fred is a producer, director, writer, musician, pilot, and an author. He's been working inside and outside of Hollywood for a long time right now, and he has some really great tips about talking to your audience. So, Fred, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so pleased to be here with you.
So, Fred, I was wondering if you can take a few minutes to break down some of those projects that you're involved with. It sounds like you have a lot of commas after your name, and I want to make sure that everyone understands what type of job or what type of jobs you're performing and how all this becomes relevant into your one big tip.
Well, I started out wanting to be a producer and director, but I was a musician professionally starting at 17 years old. And I had my own band at Disneyland. So that got me into that area. And then the music and moving into production. By the time I was in my early 20s, I had started a production company. And by the time I was 30, I had built it up to a multi-million-dollar company that kept on for a total of nearly 40 years in the business. And through that, I was able to do very, very large corporate work. But I also did television pilots, and I did a lot of film work, IMAX films, just all over the place and all over the world in multiple formats, big multi-million-dollar documentaries. And I just had a great run of a lot of variety. But it's a business. It's not just the creative. So you got to have your right brain and your left brain engaged a lot. So I learned so many lessons, some of them the hard way. And I also ended up meeting a lot of very top executives of Fortune 500s. And I ended up consulting with some of them on communications issues. And I learned a whole lot along the way. So I ended up putting that into a book called Advocate for the Audience, because when I broke it down, so much of the communication that an executive in any business has to do has to have a focus on who you're talking to and what their needs are, not your own. Because so many executives will talk about what's important to them, not what's important to the individual members of the audience. And the other part I learned from Disney, and if you just watched his work, he would teach and reach an audience and through an emotional as well as an intellectual level. So even in a corporate world and in a business world, touching people emotionally as well as intellectually at the same time is so much more effective. If you start to focus on their needs and make them feel something, sometimes it's a laugh, sometimes it's, oh, that's touching. Sometimes it's, wow, that is really cool. But it elicits an emotional response if you tell a story the right way. So essentially, I've been a storyteller. And because I was not in the Hollywood scene, anything that we're doing, you have a much smaller team. So when you say you're the producer and a director and a writer, I wrote most of what I produced and directed. And then I would also have production managers and people like that. We call them producers now, but they're production managers. So that's how I came up with this advocate for the audience, is that focus on who are you talking to and what is the need of the ultimate audience, but put it in terms of the person you're talking to when you're pitching your idea.
So that's really interesting that you say that. I usually call it speaking corporate versus speaking technical, right? And part of my career trajectory has been being a sales engineer. So a sales engineer is basically being the sales guy, but also needs to speak tech when he needs to speak tech, right? Because it's very easy to throw the acronyms around and assume that everyone understands the technology to the same level that I do, but also the benefits of what it is that we're selling. Like if I'm selling a particular software piece, I need to be able to convey very clearly, first of all, how it's going to interface with their system, but second of all, what it's going to do for them, what benefit are they going to get for it? And that is essentially, talking to your audience. So when you wrote this book, Advocate for Your Audience, what would you say are like 2 or 3 of the biggest tips that you can give that illustrate how to be the best advocate for the audience whenever you're making a pitch, whether it's in Hollywood or pitching a Fortune 500 VP or president? Where would you start?
Well, I would start with, what is it that your ultimate audience wants to know, needs to know, and is really interested in? If you're with a corporation, it's not what last year's results were. They probably know that. So often it's going on about how we're going to do this and increase sales or achieve some monetary numerical goal, as opposed to achieving a goal that is less in monetary terms and more in terms of satisfying the client. What are you going to do for the client? How does it work for the client? And then finding a good way to make that happen. And one of the things I found is most of the best people that I worked with for many, many years, and I did resign some clients that were just terrible to work with. Chevrolet was one of them. They loved me, but they don't pay their bills very well.
Firing a client, that's a thing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I fired about 4 or 5 of them along the way. One was a great client for many years. Huge tire company, Japanese company. And got along great. The VP retired. The guy who took his place wanted kickbacks. I said no and hell no.
Right.
So yeah, there are some, but most of the big ones stayed with us for anywhere from 20 to 35 years. And I'm
amazing.
talking about American Airlines, NCR, Pitney Bowes, Learjet, a lot of companies. So
interesting.
So, but there's a real one quick example. As I was in a meeting and I was there to meet about a corporate thing, project, but the advertising guy, and I never did the ads for them, they had their agency, had to have a video made because they were introducing American Airlines service to Europe that was new at the time. It goes back a ways. But they were going to address a group of travel agents in Germany, big, from all over Europe. And this was the major introduction for Americans. So how do you do it? And the agency came in, they were going to do what would be essentially a long form commercial, about 7-8 minutes long. And they wanted $450,000 to do it. And I was asked to sit in on this meeting, and I got all done because I did a lot of long form videos. Hell, we won over 100 awards for the work we did in corporate work, as well as other things. And the agency just was all agog about doing this big thing. And I turned to the VP and I said, Tom, is this even in your budget? And he said, no, this is blowing my budget all to heck for this quarter. But what would you do it for, Fred? Because he knew that I did real high end work too. And I said, well, I'd do it for about 250. And he looked at me and he said, wow, that's pretty cool. I said, but what, you can't even afford to do this. And what they're proposing is really a commercial. It's got all the rates and the flight numbers and everything else in it. What if I could solve your problem for $40?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you could? And I said, yeah, I've got a video on the shelf you could use to open it. And the agency immediately jumped in and says, no. There's got to have all the flight information and the pricing and all that. I said, guys, it's not a commercial. It's a live event. You're not understanding your audience. Your audience doesn't even know who American is. The whole purpose of this video is not to sell the stuff. It's to the specific flights. It's to introduce them to the brand. So this is a branding play that's 4 or 5 minutes maximum, and it opens a meeting. Then somebody has to get up and talk to these people. That's where you reveal all the content. So he says, well, that sounds great. And that video was a big success last year. And the agency says, yeah, but it's got the old flight attendant uniforms in it. I said, if you're not in part of the airline, you don't even know.
Right.
It's fine.
Yeah, no, the people in Germany aren't even going to realize that.
Right. You don't understand your audience, guys. And then the guy says, okay, but what's the $40 for? I said, it's the FedEx charge to have the video taken off the shelf and on your desk tomorrow morning. And as we're walking out, I turned to Tom and I said, well, I guess I'm a pretty crappy salesman because I just turned away $250,000. Tom says, no, Fred, you didn't get the sale, but you own the client.
Save the client a lot of money, and you delivered what needed to be delivered.
And we did all of their biggest work for the next 35 years. And the president of the agency and the senior vice president called me after that meeting and apologized for his people even trying to do this long form stuff for a live audience, because he says, we do the commercials. We don't know this side of the business. And I've told my people the next time they get a call like that is to immediately call you. And I ended up getting quite a few referrals from the agency for some really cool work that was not advertising. They did advertising.
That wasn't basically in their wheelhouse.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a great example. Thank you very much for that. Fred, why don't you tell people where people can reach out to you and get in contact if they want to learn more about your production company?
Certainly. And the production company, I've closed now. I'm now independent, which is how I wrote the book, and I'm just loving it. My doctor says I just put 10 years on my life by not being in charge of trying to make payroll for hundreds of people every year. And they can reach me at fred@fredashman.com. That's my email. And the website is fredashman.com, FREDASHMAN.com. And that's where we also sell the book, Advocate for the Audience, which has gotten some really great reviews. And it's from business people. The foreword was by the former executive vice president of American Airlines, who was one of my bosses for 30 years plus there. And it's really a lot of business tips on every page, but it's in the context of true stories and real live examples from my business, but they apply to almost every business.
Thank you very much for agreeing to come on the show and to share some of that experience with us today. It's all very much appreciated.
I am very honored to be on your show. And maybe if I come back sometime, we can talk about what some of these executives taught me about decision making.
Sounds like a great next topic. Thank you very much.